Well, today I got to talk about my brother. Actually, I had more than one brother. He was a fighter pilot in the 8th Air Force, including P-47s and P-51s. And but I want to kind of mention that I was the youngest of 12, and I had 6 brothers and 5 sisters. And 5 of those brothers were in the Second World War. My brother Art, he enlisted in the Coast Guard right after, about a week after Pearl Harbor. And then Harold, he enlisted after that. But he was in the Coast Guard. He was out in Montauk Point, New York. And he was guarding the coast out there, and he was about a mile away from where they landed the Germans sub-landed those spies. So he wasn't very far away from there. Harold, he was working on the railroad out in Salt Lake City, and he enlisted about 3-4 weeks after Pearl Harbor, and he went in the Air Force, but he didn't get called up till later on, April or May or something like that. And then I had Bill. He was working on the railroad out there too, and he could have been deferred most of the year, but he decided to get drafted. And he was ended up in Italy and in the Signal Corps. It was in Mark Clark's army out there. And Maury, he got drafted. He was married, and so he got drafted a little later. And he ended up in the 70th Division, and they went to. He was in Patton's army, and he was when he got over there, just got over there. They were heading for the Battle of the Bulge. He was in on that. And Ozzy, he was drafted in the Coast Guard, and he was out in the Pacific. He was a helmsman on was it that big tank, all the tanks and stuff, LSTs. And he drove, he piloted some of these landing craft down to the beach there in the Philippines. And I had a cousin that was on D-Day. He was in the first wave, and then the Big Red One, he was killed on Omaha Beach. And I had 3 brother-in-laws that was in served. Red was a Marine, and he lost a lung on, he was wounded on Iwo Jima. And Jimmy, my other brother-in-law, he was in the Aleutians when they retook the Aleutians away from the Japs. And then there was Harley. He was in the Canadian Air Force until they bombed Pearl Harbor, and then he transferred down here to the American Air Force, and he trained multi-engine pilots through the whole war. Never did get overseas. In 1942, we moved out to Salt Lake City, me and my sister and my mom. And my dad was working out there in the chemical plant out there. And we were there a little while, and Harold had just finished cadets, and he had got his wings, and they transferred him up to Wendover Field. And he was supposed to be a bomber pilot, but they give him these sheets of what do you want to fly, you know. I suppose they give 3 choices of what kind of an airplane you want to fly, and he kept putting down single engine fighters, single engine fighters, single engine fighters. And they did that 2 or 3 times, and they finally said, well, we got some single engine fighter pilots to train down there. So they sent him to Baton Rouge. And at the time he went down there, they only had 1 airplane, one P-47. So, and they take turns on the P-47, and then they told them to fly any plane on the base. And they had a lot of different kinds of planes. There was some T-6s and P-40s, and they had one Avenger there that he said he went to read the instructions. He had to ask the crew chief how to start it. So he showed him how to start it, and he flew that. And then they didn't have any, it wasn't going to get any in for a while, any P-47s, so they sent him to Biloxi. No, Galveston. Galveston, and he did a lot of training in the P-47s there at Galveston. And they'd go fly off and do some, try to do some combat dogfights and stuff like that. They practiced that. They weren't supposed to, but they did. And they sent him up to Nebraska for combat training up there. And there in Nebraska, they had to do cross countries, and at this time I moved back to Austin, and I was out there mowing the lawn, and all at once this here loud thing comes flying over the top of me. It was just noisy. It was Harold. He was, if he'd have been any lower, he could have looked in the window, the bedroom window. The leaves were flying off the trees. He hit them. He said he was going over 500, going almost 500 miles an hour. I didn't get much of a look at him, and I didn't. When I turned around, he was gone. So it was. Then we went over to Rochester. He landed in Rochester, and then I got to go over there and see him, and I got to sit in a P-47. And that was a real thrill for me, because I was the only kid in high school that had sat in a P-47. And from there, he went to England, and he was at a record depot there that he said they needed 7 guys in the 8th Air Force, and there was 10 fighter pilots that went over there with it. And he says 3 to the 9th Air Force. So he went to the 8th, and he took a train down to Rayton. He got assigned to the 353rd Fighter Group, and he was in the 350th Fighter Squadron. And when he first got there, they had the noses painted on the P-47 all white. And I guess that was so that these tail gunners wouldn't mistake them for 190s. And then later on, they painted them with a yellow and black checkerboard. His letters on the side was LH for his squadron. He named his airplane Plain Jane, because his wife's name was Jane. And this was the biggest airplane and the heaviest, and that we had in the war. And they had a big 2800 engine, 18-cylinder. It had water injection, and it was good for 5 minutes or so. And they had a supercharger for high altitude, and they could fly about 480, I think, was their top speed. And their wing shape was like a Spitfire, and that's why they were, I guess, so maneuverable. And And they had one guy not in his squadron, but in his group, they had 5 cylinders shot away, and he flew it back to England. The ordnance they carried was he said a couple times they carried 2 1,000-pound bombs out of the wings, plus a drop tank full of gas. And there wasn't too many airplanes that could, too many single-engine airplanes that could lift that, but they did. They carried twice. He said they carried 2,000-pound bombs, two 1,000-pound bombs, and they carried a lot of 500-pound bombs, and they carried 250-pound bombs. They carried incendiaries, and frag bombs, and the skip bombs. And they carried a lot of these skip bombs. They delay 11 seconds. And he said he was dropped one on an engine on a train, and he says he dropped it must have been a little late because there was a ditch there, and the thing went down in the ditch and right up after him. It followed him up, and it's a good thing it was 11 seconds because he had a chance to pull off to the side and it blew up. And he said he dropped it twice. He went into the tunnel. He saw smoke coming out of the tunnel, so he dropped the skip bombs in there. And he said he couldn't miss because they had those like funnels going into the tunnel. And he says even if you hit the side, it'd still get in there, and it'd blow up in there. And they also had rockets and 850 caliber machine guns. In the last 50 rounds, he said there was incendiaries. So when you start seeing incendiaries coming out, you know you're out of ammunition. He flew 74 missions over there, plus some training missions. Now these training missions were actually secret missions. And they didn't get credit for that, so they called them training missions. And when he first got over there, some of the secret missions, they flew over the coast of France and to draw anti-aircraft fire. They wanted to find out where the most concentration of anti-aircraft guns was. So they'd fly these at different altitudes. They'd fly over and back and over and back. And they called it was a secret mission. It wasn't in the squadron archives, but probably in higher left. So, and then he flew one mission where he escorted 2 B-17s to Heligoland. It's a little island over there, someplace by Norway or something like that. I'm not sure where it is, but they were manufacturing something over there, and they wanted to get rid of it for that. So they flew 2 B-17s over there, which he didn't know because they usually they form up after they had got up there and flew around a while, and then they'd take off later and catch up with them. But he flew the escort, and he didn't know at the time that the 1 B-17 they had bailed out already. The pilot and the co-pilot, it was the same mission as this Joe Kennedy got killed. Same kind of a mission. They had the 1 B-17 loaded with explosives. And he said when they got over there, they flew that B-17 into the ship factory or whatever it was, and he said it was a tremendous explosion. And his first mission that he went on, they had 500-pound bombs in it. And he went after a bridge in southern France. And he said he hauled them 500-pound bombs over there, and he missed. He missed the target, and he came back and he says, I'm not going to be hauling that stuff over there and miss. I'm going to, he says, is there someplace I can practice bombing? And so they told him, yeah, there's this partially sunken ship out there in the North Sea, right by the coast, and it was in shallow water, and they used that for bombing practice. So he loaded some 100 pounds down there. He went out there quite a few times to practice his bombing techniques, and he said he got really good at it. He could split a railroad track. He said with the bombs, a lot of times they do that. I've got a book here that's this is about a squadron. It's Jonah's Feet Are Dry. And kind of a funny name for a book, so I asked him, what's that mean? He said, well, they used to go fly over when they took off, and they'd go radio silence all the way to the coast. And when they got to the coast, well, then they'd radio back and say, Jonah's feet are dry. So that's why the book, the guy that wrote it, Jonah's feet are dry. Let's see. And one mission he flew was when it was I don't know, he wasn't very long. Anyway, his element leader was shot, he was hit by flak, and he had to land and belly in someplace there. And he says, Harold says, oh, I'll fly down. And so he went down with him and saw where he was landing. And the guy got out of the airplane and went into a woods, and then he came back out and got something out of the cockpit, and then went back into the woods. And then Harold says they usually give him a strafe job, so the Germans would fix up the airplane and fly it along with it. So anyway, the guy got through Belgium or something and got back to the squadron in about a month and a half. And Harold asked him, well, when did you go back and get out of the cockpit? And he says, well, I had to get my maps, he said. He said, what good will that do you? The maps ain't going to do you any good. Well, he says, I didn't want the Germans to get them. And he had stuff written down. And anyway, he got back to the squadron. And Harold was hit by flak not long after that, right out in the wing. And at the same time, he got hit underneath the belly, right underneath the seat. And it kind of blew him out of the seat. And his engine quit. So he radioed up and said he was going to belly in. And he just happened to reach down and flip the tank, the line, and put it in another tank. And he did that, and the engine started again. So he said, oh, I'll fly it back. So when he got back, he asked for a straight-in approach because he didn't know if his wheels was going to come down because he was hit right out the wing, right by the wheel. And he went down and locked, and he landed, and they got a picture of his crew chief with his head up through the wing, through that hole that got blown open. And then one time he was flying along and he seen this P-38. He was alone too. You know, once he got separated because when they get on the strafe and or get in a dogfight or something, they get separated. And this P-38 come up and he flew right alongside of him. And the guy waved to him and then he flew about a little while and then he just peeled off. And when he got back to the base, he was telling me, he said, I had this P-38 flying along with me. He said, and he asked him, he says, see if there's any P-38s in that area. And there wasn't any American P-38s. This was a German. They told him, well, you flew formation with the Luftwaffe yesterday. And then he said, you gotta be careful. He strafed a lot of trains and stuff, and you gotta be really careful because they had a habit of putting a flat car on there with machine guns and quads and 20 millimeters and stuff like that. So you just be careful. You can't hit them fast and go for the engine and then get out of there because they'll be shooting back at you. Somebody radioed down to him and said, I'll escort you home. And the guy was actually flying south. And he says, do you know what direction you're going? And the guy says, well, not really, because our navigator got shot up, and we think he's dead. And some of the instruments got shot up. Well, he says, if you keep going that way, you'll end up in Spain. So, well, you better change course. So the guy changed course, and he wandered off a few times, and so he kept him on the right course, and the guy offered him a case of booze when he got back, but he never got it. And this one time he went into, him and his wingman went in to strafe this airfield. There was quite a few different airplanes down there. He came in and strafed it. And he was going to put one bomb in or both of them, I guess, in the hangar. But he was strafing it down, and he got down close enough, and they started shooting at him, and they had everything you could think of. There was shells going both ways across, and they were coming up from behind, and they were coming from the front, and all directions. And this is one of those airfield traps that they built over there, so that they just had them really fortified. And he says he just stayed really low, as low as he could go, and there was a little town there, and he said he flew right down Main Street there, and he says there was a gal that was hanging her clothes out on this balcony, and he could see her face as you just missed her. But he says by staying low like that, why he didn't think they'd just shoot into the town. And he got through the town, and he radioed his wingman, and he was all right. He said, where are you at? He said, I'm up here at 12,000 feet. He says, I seen what they were doing to you. And they got back to the base, and this guy, his wingman, says, hey, the war's over. The Germans run out of ammunition. They shot it all at Asper. So, they escorted these paratroopers in Market Garden. He was in on the escort, and then they'd go down and strafe different things when they got done, or you know, when C-47s would head back to, you know, and then they'd go down and strafe different things. But these were at the time a whole bunch of 190s and 109s were coming their way, and he radioed that he seen there's a whole gaggle of fighters coming at us. So he got 119 head on, and this when he shot down one of his planes. They were doing something around the front in France there, and they seen a bunch of Red Cross trucks. They were heading toward the battle front, and they were thinking that they might have been loaded with supplies instead of being Red Cross, you know, instead of wounded. They thought they were hauling supplies to the Germans. So they were told that if they see any more than one or so Red Cross vehicle heading for the line to shoot at, sitting there and deal with it. They were suspect anyway, and they were told to do it. He said they do a lot of bombing on marshalling yards, and he says, but most of the time they bomb a marshalling yard, and by the next day or 2 days later they'd be running trains through it anyway. So they'd go out and out away from there and bomb the tracks where there was a bridge or something like that, or a rail bridge or that. They'd take care of the tracks, and it'd take them longer to fix it. They'd hold them up longer than if they bombed the yards. He had about 50 missions, or maybe more, and he came flying back, and here at the airfield there was 48 brand new Mustangs, all lined up in a row. And when they went down, they said, "Well, say goodbye to your P-47s. You've got 3 days to familiarize yourself with the P-51s, and you just take them up and bring them out, because you're going on a mission in 3 days." And that's all they had. They all went to the 9th Air Force, I guess, the P-47s, over to England, no, over to France. So he was the only one that had his airplane didn't go because it needed a $500 check. So he's the only one in the squadron that had 2 airplanes. He could fly either one. After that, they flew quite a few escort missions into Germany, and he said he got a chance to see some jets, but you only got a glimpse of them because they go by so fast that he says he had one jet fly by, and by the time you would go toward them, try to catch them, they were gone. He said it'd fly about 100 miles an hour faster than what we could fly. And unless you could, when they went down the strafe or something, and you happened to see one landing or something, then you could shoot at it. But then they changed their tactics on a lot of the other planes. The 109s and the 190s and that would dive out from high altitude and go right down through the bombers, and they were going 500-600 miles an hour down through the bombers, and the way they go. And he said you didn't have much chance of chasing them either. unless you could get them ahead of time or find them at high altitude, he says there wasn't much chance of shooting one down. One time he was coming in, this was with a P-47, and he landed, he was low on gas, and he had been low on gas for almost all the way across the North Sea. And so he thought he better hit this emergency airfield that the Brits had there. So he called in and asked him if he could make a straight-in approach because he was really low on gas. And they okayed it, and he came in and taxied up to where he could, to run at the end of the runway there, and just turning in from the into the taxiway, and he ran out of gas. And the Brits came out there and he says, "Well, we'll get you some gas, but in the meantime, go up and see the head guy there." And the guy offered him some tea, and he sat and talked a while, and went back down and got in the airplane. He turned the switch on, and he says, "Did you guys put any gas in here?" "Oh yeah, you're gassed up all right." And they put in just enough gas for him to fly to Raiden, to his airbase. Nothing extra. And he says, "Here is probably our gas anyway." The day before he left, he was sitting around, they weren't doing nothing, and him and the guy that he was going to go back to the States with, they asked him if he'd go up and, just one of them would go up and fly some missions in for some Lancasters or some British bombers that wanted some target practice, or they would make some passes at these bombers. So they flipped the coin, and Harold didn't make it. The other guy went up, and a little while later, they had a head-on collision up there. And the guy that he flew in, had a head-on collision with, bailed out, but Harold's buddy didn't make it. They lost quite a few guys in the squadron. Some shot down, mostly with flag. And so when he got back to the States anyway, he was training Moroccans how to fly, fighters. And then when the war was over, he ferried P-47s to Nebraska, so to junk them. He said he wished he would have landed one in somebody's cornfield and taxied into the barn someplace. He said it was worth some money out of it. He said they'd have never missed it. And when he was asked, he was asked all the time which one he liked to fly best, P-47s or P-51s. He says, "Well, if I'm flying around in air shows or something like that, I'd rather fly the P-51. But he says, in combat, I'll take the P-47. And he says, I'm glad I didn't have a tail gunner to wake up every half hour." He didn't say that, I just made that up.
I'll get you with it.
So, any questions? I probably won't be able to answer them, but...
Sure. You really talked about all your siblings and whatnot are in the service and whatnot. Are any of them still alive and whatnot?
Harold's the only one. I got one brother and one sister left.
His brother Harold is 90 years old.
Yeah, he's 90 years old. He's out in Orcas Island And he rides in the parade with Bill Anderson, and that's the first astronaut around the moon, the one that didn't land on the moon, but the first astronaut around the moon. And he's a good friend of his. So. I got these picture of him, and there's some books here. And there's some pictures in there, in that Jonas Peter guy there of Harold, and you want to look them over? Well,
Myron, a great job. Let's hear it for him.